Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton and I'm going to be your guide for the next 20 to 30 minutes. And I'm super excited to bring on another guest today who also has a background in the hospitality industry, just like me. And I think the important thing I want to say just before we kick this off is that, teamwork in hospitality isn't just a nice to have, it's an absolute essential. It's the survival of the business.
Yeah.
From when the guests walk through the door, it is full on until they leave. And the pressure is always on 24/7 in a hotel. So that's the topic I'm going to be diving in today with Karen Borain, who has led teams at Southern Sun, which is a hotel chain in South Africa. And she has 41 years experience in teamwork. So we can really learn some practical examples from her. Karen, welcome to Impactful Teamwork. We are super excited to have you here today.
Fantastic. And I'm just as excited to be with you. So, from Johannesburg in South Africa, although having worked for Southern Sun, and I was with them for a very long time. And during those times, led teams. So for me, 43 years in the hospitality industry, 41 of those leading teams, and 35 of them with Southern Sun in a job that I absolutely loved. I headed up training and development. Fortunate to report to the CEO, which is wonderful for training and development because it gives you a seat at the table, but also leading teams. So I come to you today as a training and development practitioner, a coach, a leadership facilitator, but I also come with the leadership experience. So I can talk about what it's like to lead teams, obviously to be in a team, as well as working in the hospitality industry, which, as you rightly said, is all about teams. It's all about teams. We're not managing widgets or machines. We are managing people in the industry.
Yeah. And you said, what I love there in your introduction was you said you loved your job. And I don't know what it is about the hospitality industry, but it is really addictive, right? Once you get into it, folks, it like gets under your skin. As some of the listeners know, Karen, even though I have my own leadership development consultancy, I still go and run restaurants, race courses on race days because I love being out in the teams. And I always describe it a little bit as my leadership learning lab, because the challenge is that once you become a consultant and a coach, sometimes we're not at the front cutting edge anymore. So I love going back and then I start practicing all the new things I've learned with team members, and it's always quite a lot of fun.
Yes. And of course, it's dynamic. So it's always going to change. And I think that's the wonderful thing. It's the hard thing, but it's the wonderful thing about being a leader. But it's about teams as well, is that they are dynamic. And each day can be so different. Each time you're there with them. It's a bit like being a parent. You think that you've got this when you have your first child, and then you have your second child, and you realize you know nothing. I think being a leader, there's something about that as well, that it changes continuously.
Oh, God, yeah. And I think that I love that word dynamic. It's a word I use a lot. And it is. You've got the dynamics of your team members and you've got the dynamics of the hotel guests. Oh, God forbid.
Yes.
With all their eccentricities and things that they want. Different stakeholders coming in. So it's always a fun place to be. But a great place where you've really got to learn how to live through change, because like you say, nothing's the same. You never know what's going to happen. The kind of you have a playbook, but you don't really have a playbook, right? Because everything's so changing and dynamic. So let me kick you off with a question then. What was the biggest leadership challenge that you had to dismantle when you got into Southern Sun? What was it that maybe you thought leadership was going to be that it wasn't? What did you have to do?
So I think that the hotel industry, one of the things as well, is quite traditional, which makes it very hierarchical. So I think that you end up with a very large focus on management and not leadership. So people are planning, they're organizing, they're controlling, and leadership is somewhere lost in there. So we talk about hotel managers that we call a manager in the hotel. He's a general manager if he heads up the hotel. So the focus is very much on management. And it's really encouraging the hotel managers to see that they're leaders and that they need to be communicating really well. They need to make sure that there's clarity of a common purpose, clarity of goals, responsibilities, all of those things. But I think the biggest leadership challenge is that hotel managers generally have come through the ranks. And so they take some of that first job with them to wherever they end up. Okay. So it's getting them to empower their teams, to trust their teams, and to make sure that the team is equipped to do what they need to do, so that the manager is not the one who's going to step in and micromanage. So for me, I think in the industry, that's one of the biggest things, is getting people to work at the right level, to trust their team to work at the right level, and to ensure that they're equipped to do that work.
And you make such a great point there, because it's very interesting, isn't it? A general manager who's come up through food and beverage is very different from a general manager who's come up through front office, and each brings their own skill set. But I think that's a big challenge that we do see in leadership. And I've had it a lot with some of the consulting work I've been doing here in the UK, where as people get promoted, like you say, you still bring the essence of the role that you were doing previously. And one of the biggest challenges, I think you nailed it there, is how do you get these new leaders to delegate and get out of the weeds? It's because they've been in the weeds. You know, they've been, uses some South African analogy because I love Africa, everyone knows. You've been in the bush, and now you've got to be in the aircraft looking down on the bush, and they still want to be in there doing everything. And so have you got any tips on how you help leaders change that mindset around that, and realize that actually, if they're going to be successful in their role, they need to let go of the reins and empower everybody else and not get in the way?
Yes. So first thing I think is to get out of people's way, because I think they do take that stuff with them. And so it's about saying, first of all, you know, your own self-awareness, get your own stuff in place. What should you be doing? How should you be filling your day? What type of leadership does your team need? Not what type of doing do they need from you? What type of clarity, what type of understanding of their own roles, etc., should they be doing? So it's so cliched, but communication is so incredibly key. And I think that so often we might know something, we expect other people to know it, and there isn't that clarity. But when you pull yourself down and you take away someone's role, they go down and take away the next person's role, and so it goes down. And so if you can start with yourself, very often they just got to stop doing some of the stuff they're doing. It's not because there's someone else who's there employed to do it. So one of the wonderful exercises that I love to do with managers is to say to them, look at your day. What part of your day do you spend managing and leading? In other words, getting work done through others. What part of your day is technical? Only you can do it. Maybe it's budgeting or something. But what part of your day is spent doing work that other people are employed to do? Okay. Because that you can just stop doing and allow those people to shine in their own space, as opposed to stepping in and doing it. So in starting to work with leaders, I think it's, first of all, identifying what they need to give up. John Maxwell says we have to give up to go up. Okay. So what do you have to give up in terms of what you're doing, so that you can do more managing and leading, and allow people who are in place to actually get on with that work? So it's a great exercise to do, to just literally in your day, look at all of those things you've done and decide, could someone else have done? Or should someone else have been doing them evening?
Yeah.
Getting people to work at the right level, and then making sure that the other people understand what they have to do to work at the right level as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We often talk here on start, stop, continue, which is exactly what you've been talking about there. Because nature knows when to start things, when to stop things, when to continue things as you go through the seasons, and yet leaders try and do it all. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a mindset, isn't there, that, or maybe this was just me when I was a leader, that how do I feel valuable? Because we're so brought up in education, aren't we, about it's all about do this, do that, do the other. And then all of a sudden you're not physically doing and creating something in the same way, or carrying out that service. And then I think sometimes as a leader, because it's an orchestrating type of energy, you're coordinating everybody. Sometimes it can feel like you're not doing anything. And I remember in my corporate role going, what do I do? What are you paying me for? Because I didn't have, I think this is probably the language, the tangible outcomes. And I know they're not always tangible. A service with a guest isn't always quite so tangible as a product, but it felt like, it felt all a bit esoteric sometimes, this leadership stuff. And then you're like, what am I doing?
And especially in a world where we like instant reward. So the leader's reward is going to come longer term. He's going to maybe look at reward over a month, a year even, where if you're doing something I don't know, clear a table, it's cleared. You can see it, it looks good, it's
Yeah.
relayed, you've got the physical evidence there.
Mm.
So I think that's probably part of it. And I think leaders today are dealing with so many different generations in the workplace. Years ago, we had your baby boomers, they were a very long generation. Today, you've got so many different generations, and of course, they are all different. And so
Yeah.
the way they work is different. And I think leaders are struggling with that a lot. And I was having a conversation with a leader yesterday, was saying, and was a hotel manager, who was saying, I need to micromanage because of the standard operating procedures that people are just not sticking to. And they just don't know. And I was like, well, maybe there's more to that. So as a leader, how do you unpack that? How do you not just take it at face value of, I now have to micromanage the standard operating procedures? How do you look at that from a leadership point of view?
Yeah.
Where's maybe
And
the care that needs to come in, the communication, the understanding, the agreed outcomes? Yeah.
And I love you make that point about the multi-generational workforce, because I think the hospitality industry, maybe more than any other, has both extremes. I know when I'm doing some catering work, I've on some venues, I've got my students, they work at the York University, they come over, they work at the race course during the summer holidays or term time or whatever it is. And at the other end, what's the polite language to use for this? My
Very
70-year-old,
experienced people.
very experienced, and it's very
Yeah.
different and I think that's the ultimate test of leadership, isn't it? Is how you adapt and flex your
Yeah,
leadership style for all these different multi-generations that
exactly.
we've got within the workplace. And I think for me, that's always been the ultimate test, is really how do you meet people where they are
Yeah.
and get them to where we want to go collectively together, when sometimes there can be a big disconnect between the more experienced staff thinking that the newer staff don't have the skills,
Yeah.
but the newer staff thinking, why do they behave like that, and everything that goes on in between
Yes.
as well, with the customer dynamic as well. I think
Yes.
one of the things that I've noticed is that, and we talked at the beginning there about that very hierarchical structure of the
Yes.
hospitality. It is quite traditional. And I was
Yeah.
always brought up, Sir, Madam. And that's just
Yes.
ingrained into my DNA,
Yeah.
right? And I find it difficult not to say that, when
Yeah.
sometimes now with the DE&I policies, that actually I shouldn't be saying that, because actually that's not the right language to be
Yeah.
using nowadays. And how do you to marry all that? And I think also then the other thing that I observe with younger generation into the hospitality industry is the way that they have been brought up, and some of the skills that they've learned, some of the things that we assume that people would have learned from home. I've had people that come and work in teams I've got, and I say, can you just go and make that customer a cup of tea? How do I make a cup of tea? Because
Yeah.
they've been to Starbucks all the time. They don't know how to
Yeah.
make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting what we assume people know from our upbringing and the way that we would have done things to what the younger generation knows. So that just adds
Yes.
to the complexity of that disconnect.
It does, but I think it also adds to it should add to the richness of the team.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that multiplier effect. Liz Wiseman talks about the multiplier effect, using these multiple intelligences in the team. So I think that one of the things that leaders have to learn is to not see that as a threat or a difficulty, but wow, we can do things differently. And
Mm,
let's tap into that knowledge, that energy, that creativity of doing things differently. And I think because it's a very traditional industry, it can get quite stuck in this is the way we do things, as opposed to saying,
mm.
how could we do it differently? What would work better? Let's learn from each other and let's tap into that
Yeah,
knowledge. But as a leader, you have to be brave to do that. You do have to be brave.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Empowering, trusting, yeah, it can be scary.
Absolutely. And I'm just curious then, because one of the things, obviously, in the hotel industry, perhaps more than in other industries, we have so many different departments
Yeah.
that all have to work together. Your front desk with your food and beverage, with reservations, with sales, with maintenance. Everyone has to work together to create that guest experience, or else it doesn't happen seamlessly. So I'm wondering if you've got some great stories or strategies you could share with us about where you've maybe seen this silo mentality
Yeah.
happening, where some teams, this is my area, this is my domain,
Yes.
want to cooperate with others, and what you found works to try and get people all pulling together, working effectively together and collaborating.
Yeah. So I love doing team coaching. So I'm not a great team builder, let's go and ride rapids down the Orange River person. I am someone who says that when you get a team together and you want to improve the performance of the team, something like team coaching really works. And I love team coaching hotel teams because when you sit there, so you have a general manager and all the department managers around the table. Now they're a team, but when you ask them questions to introduce themselves, and I ask them to say things like, what do you bring to the team? What do you need from the team? What are your challenges in the team? I'll let them go for a while and they start talking, and that team of peers always looks down at the team they manage, and they will introduce themselves talking about the team they manage. And after they've introduced themselves, I ask them, but what about this team? And it's almost like they look around the table and say, what do you mean? And I say, this is your team. When I'm asking you, what do you need from the team? I'm talking you guys, you peers sitting in the room. You are the team. And it's almost like it's a huge eye-opener for them because they're so focused on giving service correctly, but they're so focused on their own team and what that team has to deliver that they don't just look sideways to their peers. And so one of the big things that we walk away after team coaching is a common purpose for that team, as opposed to them seeing themselves as I've got to deliver for my department. I'm an HOD, head of department, I'm delivering for that department. What we get out of that session of agreeing a common purpose as a team and seeing how they can build norms and values and processes amongst each other, it's the hugest eye-opener for them that breaks down those silos. And I absolutely love doing that. So I feel quite bad because I let them go through the process of introducing, and then I say, so which team were you talking about? And every time they're talking about the team they lead, not their team, that their peer team. And it's a huge awakening for them. So they have a common purpose and they're working together, and they don't have those silos, which are very obvious silos. If they don't have them anymore and they find norms and behaviors to work as a peer team, it's groundbreaking. It makes such a huge difference to the operation. And to the other teams, then the kitchen realizes they can work with the waiters. It's okay because they can see the executive chef and the food and beverage manager working together, maybe for the first time ever, and then, wow, we can do this too. So it changes the whole dynamic in the whole operation.
Yeah, and I love that because, how often do people, when you say, how's your team, think about a vertical team rather than that peer team, which is so important. Yeah, because without that horizontal team working, the whole guest experience doesn't happen. So have you got any telltale signs that you've noticed from your experience when you can maybe tell when a team, whether vertical or horizontal, is getting out of sync? Getting out of sync. Just how do you notice that before things go wrong? Obviously, when everything goes wrong, we know, oh, that team had a problem. But have you got any tips on things that you might pick up on prior to that happening?
Yes, I think that when you see that it's not seamless. So the guest is going to have a great experience in one area and not in another. Then you can start to see there's a breakdown in communication. So maybe an example in the hotel, check-in goes really well. They get to their room and it's a problem. Who do they come back down to? They don't phone housekeeping. They come down to reception and complain to reception. So when reception don't have a great relationship with housekeeping, it's immediately toxic. And the blame game starts. And the guest challenge doesn't get seamlessly sorted because we're all looking at whose problem is this anyway. So when you have teams that have sorted out that relationship, it's just going to flow. And your front office person is going to take responsibility for a housekeeping issue because they're a team. When they're not a team, it's the blame game starts, and then you just don't get things resolved. And at the end of the day, the guest suffers because it escalates.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's one of the things that one sees immediately when there's just not that seamless flow of problem solving.
Yeah. And one of the challenges I think this industry has, and I heard a stat the other day that turnover levels were like 75% in the
Yeah,
hospitality industry, which was just shocking. So, how do you make this work when you're working in an environment where we've got often really high turnover going on?
yeah,
Because we've not got that longevity of relationships, right? You build a
yeah,
relationship and then that person leaves and you build. I'm just wondering what some of your thoughts are on that.
yeah. And so the team is always new, actually. So it's
Mm.
always in that forming. So it's
Yeah.
so key. Yeah, in the forming stage, we go to Tuckman. It talks about forming, storming, norming, performing. So you're always
Yeah.
in this forming stage because you've got new people. And that is even more important why the common purpose. What are we here to do as a team? And clarity of role and responsibility. I think that is so important. And so the leader's role is to always make sure that the people understand the team's common purpose, and then they understand their own role in that. They have clarity of role. Where do I fit in? And what am I responsible for? How will I be measured? I think is so incredibly important. And if you don't have the clarity as a leader, people coming in are just going to be lost. They're going to come in and try and do some work. Okay, they'll be working, but they won't necessarily be contributing.
Yeah.
So if you have the clarity as a leader of what is the purpose of this team and what are the roles, responsibilities, who fits in where, what are the team norms, what's okay in this team and what isn't okay. If you've got clarity on that and everybody else has got clarity, it's so easy to bring new people in, as opposed to if you don't have clarity and they flounder.
But what's your experience of having really effective onboarding for new people? Because I know that I'm guilty about throwing people into a role and going, I just get on with it. So let's talk a little bit about onboarding. How do we make that experience better for people so that they
Yeah,
come, they stay in the organization, they understand the expectations, what their responsibilities are, they actually understand the role that they're meant to be doing and get the right training for it, to go to your
yeah.
point.
And I think that's where, as a leader, we can identify strong people in our department and give them the recognition of being strong, and we can buddy them. In the industry, we've got
Yeah.
lots of turnover. You, as the leader, aren't necessarily the one who's got to give that clarity, common purpose, role, and responsibility. You don't have to necessarily be the communicator of it if you use your people properly. So if you've got really strong people and you set them up as a buddy system, so new people coming in get buddied with those people that you know are have bought into
Mhm.
the team ethics, the team purpose, the team roles, responsibilities. And then you have to empower them as the great workers to buddy with people. And so I think that a buddy system works really well in the hospitality industry to bring people on board rather than it being a leadership role. Again, because of the hierarchy, sometimes when you're communicating as the leader of the department, people are just wide-eyed and unsure, where if you buddy people, it's so important.
Yeah.
And it works really well. It's built teamwork and it just gets the job done quicker.
Southern Sun obviously have multiple properties across South Africa and other destinations across the world.
Yeah.
Did you ever have people moving between properties, or did people just tend to stay in that unit, or did you manage to leverage skills across different locations?
Yes. So at the management level, you get a lot of movement around. You find that
Hmm.
at the entry level positions, if I can call it that, your servers, your receptionists, they're not necessarily moving around between the properties a lot. So you might have a lot more stability
Hmm.
there, but they can. And there's opportunities to work in different brands within the group, different locations as well. So you do get that. But those standard operating procedures are key there. After I've said that, we just got to use
Yeah.
them properly. You've got to use them properly. So they are there, they're known.
Mm.
You're budding people up. It's easy for people to move. And there is that opportunity to move as well. There's a lot of training that is done in the organization. The managers do their own standard operating procedure training. That is given to them. So there's no a central team that does that other than for an opening of a property. But otherwise, the managers take responsibility. They know those procedures. They're going to make sure they're trained. Are they doing it exactly themselves? No, they're
Hmm.
probably using a buddy system. But there is that opportunity, which is amazing when you've got nearly 100
Yeah.
properties that people can move between.
Yeah. And that provides, with the high level of turnover we have in the industry, the succession planning also becomes a challenge, doesn't it? Who's going to take over this property next? Who am I going to promote to the next department head? You got any thoughts you want to share on managing succession planning in a very dynamic industry with high levels of turnover?
Yeah. So I think that it's making sure everybody's got a learning path. There has to be a learning path. So there's got to be stuff people can learn, whether it's the skills material that they've got to learn, or whether it's more of your supervisory level, your management level. There's got to be opportunities for people to learn all the time, because the industry is dynamic as well. You've got the different departments. People can move between departments, between properties, between levels. So you've got to really make sure that people are equipped, that there is learning opportunity all the time, and cross-functional learning opportunity. It can't just be singular. It's got to be cross-functional. I think that's really important in the industry, that people have access to learning. Access to learning, I think, is key.
Yeah. And I read something the other day, actually, that definitely the sort of Gen Z coming through are always looking for learning. They really want to develop themselves, continue to learn and develop. And actually, they're leaving organizations that aren't creating those opportunities for them to continue to grow and develop.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, because you spoke about learning, not training. We need to make sure people have got access to learning, that they can take responsibility for their own decisions around learning. And I think that's so key for any organization.
And I think nowadays as well, because again, some of the research, and I'll signpost everyone to the podcast a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about soft skills. I hate the word soft skills. We now call them meta skills. But the fact that actually a lot of the skills per se are diminishing, and because of AI and other things, and I'm still yet to see to get in my head how we get AI to clear a table in a restaurant or something like that, but no doubt over time. We've seen it on reception, right? Self-check-in, it's now happening. You could see how some of the roles might change, but I think it's really important that people, that's why I talk about learning, because actually we've got to develop our meta softer skills around communication, you know, how to have difficult conversations with team members. All these types of things are actually what's going to help you as a team member stand out going forward. Your ability to be agile and make critical decisions and move with the moment are going to be the things that are going to distinguish a great team member from an average team member when some of the skills are diminishing over time.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's really interesting to see.
But I do believe the hospitality industry will be labor intensive for a very long time. That's part of what people go to have, that experience of engaging with people, engaging with someone who's going to serve me, that I have a great experience.
Yeah, and I love it that you say that, because that's such a big topic at the moment, isn't it, in the whole coaching world, is about connection and how do we build connection. And I think experiences are a way that actually we can build connection, we can get reconnected to ourselves. And, you know, in some ways, they're our escape from tech, right?
Yeah.
Because we live in such a high-tech society that actually sometimes we just want to go back to human interaction.
Exactly.
And in something like a restaurant, a hotel, something like that, we can actually experience that, which I think is super powerful. And I know that some of my most fun experiences are actually going out to events and actually interacting with people and interacting with your friends there, and that vibe. Yeah, no, I totally agree. You know, we have seen some hotels almost get not fully automated because they've got way less amenities, right? So you've just got your check-in and it can just be automated, but that's all right until it goes wrong.
Yes.
And then it's just a nightmare to find somebody that can help you out. I was staying in a hotel actually not that long ago, and it had automated all the check-in, and all the check-in terminals had gone down, and it was like the staff weren't actually quite sure what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And it took me back to the days of when I used to be a front office manager, when computers were like just coming in right behind the front desk. And people wouldn't understand this, but a Whitney board was basically a way that you figured out, you're as old as me, you figured out which rooms were occupied, and you put like a little, I don't know, what, you peg in it, and this room's occupied, and you moved it all around. And I remember like computer systems crashing, and we had to literally go back to a manual system. And people couldn't do that because they didn't know what it was. So, yeah. Sorry. And you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about leaders in organizations, we'll find it difficult to manage people, but I think we have to also look for the joy in it. And I'm saying to hospitality leaders, you love to work with the guests and engage with the guests. And so how do you take some of that and look at that in the same way of dealing with your teams, so that the skills that you use with the guests to hear them out when they have a challenge and look for solutions, how do you bring that skill into your leadership of your team? And the satisfaction that you get with dealing with guests and resolving guest complaints, how do you see that as the same skill with your team? And I think that when we can start as leaders to really enjoy the teamwork before we lose some of it to AI and automation, just actually start seeing it as the richness of a team and the joy of leadership and the energy we can get for leadership. That's what makes it fun. That's why we sign up for this, to be a leader.
Yeah, because who would want to be a leader for 16, 18 hours a day in the hotel industry with some 24/7?
You said it gets under people's skin. I think it grabs their heart as well and just holds on, and they give themselves so much. Yeah, that's what we want our teams to do, is to just give their whole selves. It's one of those industries that are addictive, as you said earlier. And so, let's look at the joy of it and the fun of it, of working with people, leading teams, and getting the success that we can get.
Yeah. And I've got to say, in all the hotels I ever worked with around the world, it was always such a great crack, to use the Irish word. It was always really joyous, and loved working with the people that we were working with. And that's what got you through, actually.
Yeah.
And even one of the reasons I go back as well to do some of this catering work is actually the people I go and work with. They are what makes the experience so great.
Yes.
So rewarding at the end of the day. You come away, you've delivered an amazing guest experience in whatever shape or form. And you've had fun doing it, right? And isn't everything in business about having fun? Except for we forget that.
Yes, we do. I had 43 years in the industry, and I've now moved more into the coaching, facilitating area. But I'm still there. Any opportunity that I get to coach, facilitate in the hospitality industry, I'm there. Yeah, because the people are just amazing. And it really takes your heart. But there's so much energy and joy and fun and reward, because you do get a lot of that instant gratification of seeing the results on a daily basis. So yeah, a great space to work in.
Oh, Karen, I'm just conscious of how long we've been chatting. We probably need to bring this to a close. But thank you so much for your time. If people want to get hold of you, what's the best way that they can reach out to you?
So I have a website, which is karenboraincoach.com. So they can pick it up on there, Karen Borain Coach. Look for me on LinkedIn. You're welcome to contact me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from people there. Or I have an email address, karen@karenboraincoach.com. I use my name, that's my branding, so pretty easy to find.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And we'll put all of those in the show notes for everybody as well. So one parting thought then for people. What do we think our listeners, what would be one great thing for our listeners to focus on in the next week based on what we shared? One thing maybe they want to do differently, they want to try, experiment with.
Make sure that your team know what they come to work to do every day. What is their purpose? Not what are the things they're doing. So just an example is that a room attendant, I wouldn't like to do her job. She's got to come and clean rooms every day. But what is her purpose? To make sure that every room she cleans is guest ready. That's what her purpose is. And that just makes it so much more exciting. Just to think about, what is your team's purpose? What is their reason for being that they come to work every day for? And make sure they know it. And then it just makes the task so much easier to live out, because you've got this reason for being, this purpose that you're working towards all the time. So that's what I would encourage them to do.
Excellent. Yeah. And then seeing how that contributes to the overall of the guest experience is so important. So that's amazing. So thank you, Karen, so much for your time today. Really enjoyed chatting with you here on Impactful Teamwork. And everyone, please listen to what Karen said there. Go out, make sure your team members are really clear on what their purpose is, how they're contributing to the organization. And we will catch you again next week. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Thank you.